Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Beyond the Code. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, and today we have a very special guest joining us. He's an entrepreneur, investor, and a true thought leader in the legal tech industry. I'm thrilled to welcome Zach Abramowitz, the founder and CEO of Killer Whale Strategies. Zach, really excited to have you here with me on the podcast. Got a lot of things to talk about today. We're going to do a little schmoozing, a little jamming. For those of you who don't know, Zach dropped a really cool music video on his YouTube channel. I'm going to drop a link in the show notes, but if you could just give a little promo to anybody who's not going to listen.
Oh, you say you want to sing. I'm trying to think of the best part. You say the price of my hour is not a price that you're willing to pay. You cry in your e-billing system as you see my bills come by. Why so sad? Remember we signed an engagement at my new rates. Now you're making me mad. You'll be back soon. You'll see. You'll why am I blanking? You'll be back soon. You'll see. You'll be subpoenaed by the SEC. You'll be back without fail. I will keep your board from going to jail. Discounts rise, law firms fall. We've expense accounted through it all. But when push comes to shove, I will bill you for my junior associates. To remind you of my love. La 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 la.
La 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 la. La 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 la. I love it. I love it. Brilliant, super creative, entertaining.
So let me ask you a question though, because like you focused on crypto. I think the sort of perception in the market is that crypto's dead, Web3 is dead. These are failed projects, and I see you shaking your head, and I was suspecting that that's not the case. Like, so like, you know, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, but I do only hold like Bitcoin right now. So like I monitor the market, but I obviously, you know, in the craze of 2021 was obviously paying quite a bit of attention, was not able to wrap my mind around all of it. But I suspect that, you know, there's a lot of times where you see certain trends have a winter, but then a resurgence. So right now, what's your take on the crypto market? Because you obviously don't think it's, you know, or is crypto dead? Is Web3 dead?
So I definitely don't think Web3 is dead. I don't think crypto is dead either. I've always said like I'm very bullish on the technology. I think both NFTs and crypto are going to be a big part of the future, both for financial markets and outside of financial markets. I think NFT technology is a great use case, something that we're going to see in the ticketing industry, something that I think we're going to see service providers adopting more closely. But this wasn't supposed to be you interviewing me. I was supposed to be me interviewing you.
I know. I'll tell you why I'm interested, right? Because like this can be a sort of segue into the AI topic. I've been seeing I'm actually seeing less of them now, but when ChatGPT first launched, I was seeing a lot of tweets that went something like this. ChatGPT is just the newest like crypto Web3 or blockchain. And so my first reaction to that is, no, it's not. I can give you very specific differences between AI and between the aforementioned industries. But also it's like kind of a weird dunk to talk about like blockchain and cryptocurrency as if it hasn't had an impact. It's like the last I checked, one single Bitcoin today is worth $24,000. Even if it was at 16,000 or 10,000 for that matter, it's like created out of nowhere, right? Like that's still like this is not like exactly a dead industry. Not only that, I think that a lot of the decisions that the government has have to like make
In the
about
past
like
week.
monetary policy, they have to be careful that there's certain moves I think the Fed might have made if not for the existence of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Meaning there's now this other sort of like silent hand that judges them. And it sort of polices their moves. So to pretend as if these industries are dead and like somehow insult AI by comparing them, I think like really misses the mark. I think AI is huge. I think these are probably very big as well.
I think it's equally insulting for both parties. I mean, AI in itself is tremendous, and so is crypto. And I think that there are, overlaps between the two, but I don't think that there's really any direct correlation between one and the other. But yeah, there's like a great meme going around. It's like Homer Simpson, like in the bushes, like coming in, coming out. So it's crypto expert, and then like going back in, metaverse expert, going back in, like AI, like all these people that are like emerging as experts in like these various different. But I think this is a great segue into AI because since ChatGPT's come on the scene, people keep asking, particularly lawyers, are asking initially, is ChatGPT going to replace me? And I gave it a little bit of thought at the beginning, and my answer now to people is ChatGPT is not going to replace you, but lawyers and other service providers who embrace ChatGPT as a tool that they can integrate into their day-to-day are going to replace you, because I think that people who shun certain technologies, okay, I was like I'm a bit of a privacy freak in my personal life, which is funny because I'm a privacy lawyer, but I don't. So I advocate for privacy, and I don't want to share my own private details with other people. So for like 5-6 years, I didn't have Facebook or Instagram or
that's 5 or 6 years of your life.
Yeah. And then when I started a business, I was like, okay, well, I need to be out there. I need to be present. But there was definitely a price to not being on there were benefits in the sense that, probably my mental health was better, but there were also downsides in the sense that like I missed tons of things that were going on. I didn't know about people's birthdays, and I didn't, see my friends' kids who I never, who lived in other countries, and I never got a chance to see them in person, and I wasn't seeing them grow up on Facebook either. So there's a trade-off to everything here. And I'm sure that some of these technologies, all of these technologies come with pros and cons, and we may shun them because of the cons, but we're going to miss out on pros, and that's a balancing act that we're going to have to do on a case-by-case basis. And I think that this one is one that we don't want to miss out on. I think that anybody who's creating content, not only as a creator, but also as a service provider, such as lawyers, who write a lot, be it emails or briefs or documents, are going to have to embrace these technologies as fully and completely as possible, because otherwise they're gonna miss out, and they're gonna be way, 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 way behind.
So you remind me of the I've seen this in the form of a tweet, probably a meme at this point, that like AI won't replace lawyers, but lawyers using AI will replace those who don't. So I recently tweeted, lawyers who are using AI won't replace you. AI that's using lawyers will. Right? So like, I
also
think
true. Also true.
We may be like ready to submit to our robot overlords. And by the way, I'm truly you don't get this from my Twitter feed, because my Twitter feed is usually like very. I would say that like I come across both, any content that I create is like very, very bullish about this version of AI, right? I definitely like come that way, but I think what people don't realize is how genuinely concerned I am about a lot of the issues surrounding AI. But before we get into the sort of the issues, I think this AI is hugely different than what came before it. I actually think that before lawyers will get replaced by AI, a lot of legal technology will get replaced by AI. So most of the technology that has been created up until today did not assume that the um, that the technology would be able to read and understand text, and like
So you, when
and
you
not
say legal technology, what are you referring to? Like
saying like
what
all
type
the
of products in
e-discovery,
particular?
all the e-discovery technology. So like, anytime someone especially in America, big lawsuit, you get the right to say, hey, listen, I want, we believe that your board knowingly committed fraud. We want all communications of the board, within from the following dates, right? And you'll get back tons and tons of sort of inside corporate communications that you've got to go through. And there's a whole process to get that information collected and then preserved and then put into a review platform so that the lawyers can review it. What if all of a sudden you can just tell an AI, ask that exact same question, right? So the example I love to give recently is you've got Sam Bankman-Fried and all of FTX's corporate communications. You can tell an AI, did Sam Bankman-Fried knowingly commit fraud? And I think we are basically at the place right now where there are technologies available that can go through all of that corporate communication, give you an answer to the question, and provide citations to the relevant corporate communications, whether they're emails or Slack messages or whatever it is. So that means that technology, yes, it's replacing some attorneys who would review those emails, but first, what it's going to do is replace a lot of the technology that people have been spending millions of dollars on in order to do these tasks. And the reason that's the case is that those technologies never assumed that it was possible to read and understand text at scale. So you've got to base, like it's based like if it's fancy search, right? It's searching for words. It's saying, oh, this email might be similar to the one you reviewed because some of the same words within the same number of words appeared. It's like Boolean search. But these
Right, but
technologies
I
that we're
think that
seeing
the
right
issue is
now,
going to be
yeah,
whether, I mean, it's not going to be whether, it's going to be to what extent there was bias that was coded into the technology, because it may have, found an answer and cited various sources within the materials stating why Sam Bankman-Fried is a fraudster, but have knowingly ignored other sources that could have balanced that out because it was biased towards putting Sam behind bars.
all right. So let's say that it gives you right now an answer, but not necessarily a complete answer. So lawyers can still always say, hey, okay, listen, this is the first look. The first look is like, this is the narrative that seems to come out of these emails. Do we think it's worth it for humans to go in and go through this entire process?
You'll have to at some point. You'll have to, because this won't be something that a judge, for example, will be able to rely on. It will be something that either counsel could rely on. So one counselors are anyways they're biased. So you could build in the bias into the tech to say, like, I want to find sources that will prove that Sam's a fraudster. And on the other side, you'll say, I want to find sources that will prove that he's not a fraudster. And then both sides will have used their AI to come with their.
This is not very different from how it works today. When
it will save
when it comes to
millions and millions of billable hours.
That's,
but they'll build them anyways. They're just not gonna.
So that's an interesting question, right? Like, because we talked about, like, will AI replace lawyers? Maybe, but on the other, I know that there's already conversations within, like, the OpenAI mafia about universal basic income, and that in fact that's going to be necessary. I almost wonder if that's like some semi-Marxist wishful thinking, because every other time in history where we've had major advances, it created the opposite effect. It grew the economy. Greater efficiency and greater productivity led to more. So just as an example, right, like, how many lawyers are there that still, have to, like, practice their penmanship? Like, once upon a time, a lawyer had to be able to write clearly and legibly, and that was an actual skill that a lawyer had to have. Like, no one does that anymore. Did the arrival of the typewriter, like, did it replace lawyers? It was ridiculous.
there's this law student from Somalia, okay, who over the last year and a half has written to me on several occasions asking me to give him an internship at my firm, okay? And every time he writes me these, really, I could tell that he labored intensely at writing me these messages on LinkedIn saying what he's doing now and why he's passionate about blockchain technology, et cetera, et cetera. Yesterday, he sent me another message, okay? It's been about 4 or 5 months since I've heard from him. And this time, I was really impressed by how more articulate he's been over the last 4 months. And then I was like, this is a clear ChatGPT output right here. Like I was able to identify it right away. So
amazing, right?
Amazing. I mean, amazing how he was able to use it, but also amazing how I was able to identify it already at this point.
That's something that would get me excited, right? Because what I think could happen here is that we democratize certain processes or services that you assumed had to be done by someone with a Harvard law degree. Why is that the case? Like, why do we only want a situation where people who got brought up, they were just lucky, they were born speaking English and living in a home where English is the mother tongue, right? Like this person from Somalia, I would love it if they can do this work, and if there's now a solution for them to be able to do it. I used to say the LSAT like had a major bias.
Well, can he do it? Or was it just the AI? Like, in other words, like to what degree was his input behind it? Did it require any brains at all? I mean, he just said, draft me a cover letter to a lawyer asking to intern at his firm. So like, what value does he give me? What more value does he bring me as an intern now that he's able to feed that input into the AI? None really.
Well, I would just for the fun of it, I would argue, if I was playing devil's advocate, that the very fact
that he knows how to use
the very
those
fact
tools,
that he was willing to put his ego aside and say, "Hey, the computer can do this better than me. Like, I'm going to try. Like, why not?" Like, I think there's so many people right now who are avoiding using these tools, despite the fact that like it can very often do their work better. I had this instance recently where I was creating some marketing materials for a new service provided by one of my clients, and I had sort of put together my own version, but then I decided, let me just take all of the legacy information they've got, put it together, show it to ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, I want to create a sort of unified one-pager. Here are all of the legacy materials that I want to use, that I want to like be part of this. And ChatGPT's version was so much better than mine. And I realized why, because ChatGPT, there were certain things like I was looking at, I'm like, the way they describe it here is not exactly consistent with the way they describe it here. And as a human, I had to kind of like focus on that, and how could I reconcile these two things? And I spent just a lot of time staring at the screen until it kind of hit me. The ChatGPT doesn't need that. It was able to look at these things and very, very quickly reconcile the differences and create something that was unified. So who's smarter? Like me for trying to do it on my own, or someone who realized, no, listen, this is something that like you can now like give to AI. I think a lot of people like I'm impressed with anyone who's like out using it, trying to figure it out right now. I kind of hear that.
Yeah. Did you get a premium subscription?
I sure did.
Yeah,
I sure did. That was very.
I mean, it
easy.
the free edition just got so bad also that like I feel like it was inevitable at this point.
100%, but I also feel like, if I'm going to be like writing about the same way you were talking about before, like you're in the world of crypto, right? Because you are to a certain extent, a crypto attorney. Like I am very much writing about AI. Like, so whether I was bullish or bearish or suspicious or reckless, I kind of have to
practice
be
what
like
you preach
in it. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question that might come off a little bit as offensive.
Do it.
Okay, so just like going back, I met you like 4 or 5 years ago. At the time, I was really excited about legal technology. I think it was at a period where I had just I took the bar, I failed the bar, and then there was like 10 months in between where I was working as like a paralegal and also studying for the bar again. And I was kind of like faced with this like identity crisis. Like, what if I fail again? What will I do with like this passion for law and this, and a law degree and a year internship that I've accumulated? I need to do something within like the legal world. So then I was kind of looking at legal tech, and it was very exciting for me. Then I passed the bar, and I started working as a young associate, and I was still really passionate about, like, because I was working with tech companies, like I still want to be an entrepreneur myself. So I was like, okay, like legal tech is the way forward. And I went to like a legal tech hackathon, and I started like building 2 products together with a friend who's also a lawyer. And then I met you, and I was like super excited, and we had coffee, and we're talking about all these things. And then I went to this hackathon and presented this product, and I heard some of the other products that were being pitched, and then I was just like, this industry sucks. Like,
Totally.
It sucks for several reasons. Like, number one, nobody wants it. Okay, like no lawyers want something that's going to make their job easier or done better or going to replace them in any sense. So it's shunned by the very people that either need to work with it or work against it. And number two, customers don't really want it either, because they're never going to reach a full level of trust that they have in somebody who they don't know anything about, but who has a degree on the wall.
Technology doesn't provide any CYA. A human is CYA.
Absolutely, but beyond the human factor, even if you develop a product that you could market, an amazing product that will completely, make every lawyer's job easier, how could you price it in such a way that you're already very, very small market of clientele, like large law firms, small law firm, whatever it be? How is it going to be worthwhile from a market perspective? So my question to you, as somebody who's developed this consultancy practice, Killer Whale Strategies, which advises law firms on various technologies, like, you tell me why legal tech doesn't suck.
So first of all, you may be disappointed in my answer, because I would say in most circumstances it does, right? So like okay. People are always surprised to hear me say that.
And yet.
So first of all, quick note, I don't just advise law firms. I advise law firms, major legal departments, Big Four, alternative legal service providers, and strategic acquirers of legal technology. So we've advised public companies as well. But to your question,
take a deep breath.
To your question, does legal technology suck? Yeah.
No. Why doesn't it suck?
Or why doesn't?
Like, we've established that it sucks. Why doesn't it suck?
Well, okay. So here's my answer. First of all, I think you're about to see major change happening right now. We are at a huge inflection point with generative AI, because again, what lawyers mostly are doing is they are reading documents, they're analyzing those documents and spotting issues, and then they're drafting coherent documents that respond to the issues they found in the first document, right? This kind of sounds like George Costanza. I take the files from this box and then I put them in this smaller box, right? So like, but there is some of that really goes on. I think people like are very surprised, especially when they start practicing, what they're like, oh my gosh, this is what lawyers do. Like, this is really, but that's a huge portion of it. Right? AI does this. It reads, it can issue spot, it can draft the response documents. So this is a major inflection point, and I do think we're already seeing significant adoption. Like, Allen and Overy rolled out Harvey.ai, which is the investment that OpenAI made in a company that was basically going to take the GPT model and fine tune it for legal, right? That's a big part of their strategy as a company. Harvey was introduced into Allen and Overy, according to the news reports, in November, and they've already rolled out to every single one of their attorneys globally. I'm hearing right now that's like close to like a third or 50% adoption rate within the firm, which is actually like highly, that's material, right? Like, it's significant. So we're at an inflection point. But I think that part of the reason that you're seeing adoption now is because over the last maybe 5 to 7 years, there have been a slew of technologies in the wake of, Amazon Web Services, making it much easier to build cloud-based software and making it, less capital intensive. There's already been a number of really good products that have been marketed into law firms. Now, yes, there's sometimes is a very significant question around like, do the lawyers actually want this? Is it in their incentives? And I say this all the time to legal technology companies. If you've built a product that is going to increase the efficiency of law firm attorneys by 15 to 20%, they're probably not going to be very interested. Number one, it's not really interesting to them. It doesn't show them how that's going to help their bottom line. There's no client that's forcing them to use the product. To learn how to use your new product is already like anxiety producing for them and their staff. They think that you're probably going to get acquired within a couple of years and your technology will be rolled up into some other product that they don't want to use. It's actually a fairly rational decision. They don't want to use it, right? So I think a lot of products were built on the back of like, hey, this is going to increase efficiency and it's a smarter way to work. That's just not a very good sale into those law firms. And I think a lot of companies have been smarter in how they built their products to deal with those issues. So I'll give you 3 examples. One is a company I invested in called Legalmation. Right. And again, I like you said before, I think it's very important to have skin in the game in what I'm doing, within legal. So I actually invest in companies. I don't have like reseller relationships where I'm selling on behalf of companies making commissions. If I think a company is great, I'm going to put my own money out of my own pockets. I don't have like a dedicated fund for this. I invest. We sometimes, and I'll tell you about this in a second, we sometimes will syndicate investments with other industry insiders from legal. But like at our core, I always like to invest with my own money out of my own pockets because that's the most sobering, right? That's where I have to really believe in the company. So the first company I invested in is a company called Legalmation. They don't just improve your efficiency by like 15 to 20%. There, it's like tasks that would have taken you 10 hours can be done in 1 minute, right? Wow. What they do is they automate all of the early filings in a litigation. So you get sued, you're handed a complaint. Once upon a time, you give that complaint to a law firm attorney. They would spend maybe 10 to 15 hours responding to that complaint, as well as producing 2 separate documents called interrogatories and RFPs that are part of the beginning of discovery. Now, in order, once you have those documents, how do you respond? There's kind of like a ping pong match that goes on between the 2 sides. Legalmation's technology knows how to literally automate all of that, especially in high volume, sort of repetitive type litigations. So now, not only is the experience totally transformative because you're going from 15 hours of attorney time to 1 minute of AI time, but they still had trouble selling that to law firms at first. So what they did was they bypassed the law firms. They went directly to major corporations, insurance companies, auto manufacturers, who had very high volume litigation. And they could say, listen, we can cut down on your litigation costs and you don't have to fire anyone internally. Instead of giving this work to expensive outside counsel, this work is going to essentially be completed by the AI, right? So that's a great example of how technology, if it's transformative enough, there is a party for it. It just may not be specifically at a law firm. For what it's worth, now Legalmation does sell a lot to law firms, but their first big wins were with insurance companies, very publicly with Walmart. So they were going direct to the buyer of the legal services. The second example, because I mentioned before that a lot of attorneys don't want to learn to use new tech, is TermScout. So they're also a company I invested in, and Gigi Levy, his fund NFX, also invested alongside us, as did David Stark from Ground Up Capital. So, or Ground Up VC, excuse me. So they, what Term Scout does is they've got a badge, and the badge is like it's this digital badge that shows up on your public contract. So if you're like a major cloud provider, IBM, Amazon, and companies are coming to sign cloud service agreements with you, if you go to IBM's contract today, it's certified customer favorable
by Term Scout.
By Term Scout.
Very cool.
And you can click on that badge to go to a sort of site where it compares and shows you, like, here's what's in Amazon's contract, and this is why IBM is more favorable. So that badge is incredible because no one has to use it, right? You're not teaching any lawyers how to use some new interface in order to negotiate agreements. But those lawyers can simply, if anyone tries to negotiate or want to like redline, they can say, listen, look, a third party has certified our agreement as the most customer favorable. We don't need to do this whole dance, this whole redlining business. And it's been, I spoke to customers.
I'm curious, how do they like create consumer awareness like to their badge? Like me as a consumer who's signing one of these like plug and play IBM contracts, like how will I identify Term Scout's badge as something that's even, like how does it become an industry standard?
So listen, that's the literally $1 billion question, right? First of all, they are the only ones doing this. I'm not aware of any other company that jumped and took this angle.
I've never heard of them. How long have they been around?
Termscout.com. So they announced funding around this time last year, and they're now being used by IBM, Snowflake, Datadog. Some of the biggest SaaS companies in the world are using this product. And for the time being, like, how are they going to build a brand? I think, the same way, like, number one, by showing you, here are the companies that are using us, that are taking us seriously. Number two, what they've been able to show to the customers is that your negotiation time on contracts will go down significantly. And then this is the most important part, sped up sales cycles, right? So how many companies really care that much about, like,
that's a selling point,
right? They don't care that much about, like, how much do we save on our legal bill, or like, but if it's, hey, your deal cycles are going to go from 6 weeks to 4 weeks because that last part where it got stuck in legal doesn't exist anymore. That's huge, right? So
I'm curious, like, and maybe this is like a conversation for another time. Like, did they have some kind of software where if I have terms on my site, I could drag and drop it into their software, and then it will rate my contract, and then I'll say like, oh, okay, interesting. Like, if I want to get Term Scout's favorable ratings, I need to do, like, will it tell me what I need to do?
This is exactly what they do. Every company that comes to them that wants to put on the badge, the first thing they have to do is sort of go through this triage process, right? Where they get cool. rated. But I think the idea is that, like, why in the world should people not know what's market when they're signing an agreement? Like, the same way you have like ratings for restaurants and ratings for everything else in the world today that you buy. When you're signing a contract, you should be able to say, like, is this a 5-star contract or not? Or is this a contract with like a poor sanitation rating? So I use that as example because that's an instance where you're selling legal technology, right? But number one, no one has to learn anything new. So minimal user experience. And number two, actual real economic benefits that are not just like, oh, we were able to save a little bit on our legal bill, which is like not a good enough reason to do something new. The last company I'll give you is sort of as an example of where I think legal technology doesn't suck is a company called Darrow. Darrow is based in Israel. Have you heard of them? Darrow, Darrow.ai. This is a crazy company. So what they do is they're like all former 8,200 people plus a couple of old Supreme Court clerks. And they say that today, when it comes to like your privacy, especially, there's companies that are stealing, they're taking your data or selling your data unlawfully or against their own terms of service, and you would just never know. There's no one out there to police it, right? If a toaster, right? Think about like the example, the hypothetical in law school, of the exploding toaster, and you sustain third-degree burns, right? You've been harmed, you felt it. But if someone steals your data, How would you even know, right? People didn't know. Think about like the Cambridge Analytica scandal as an example, right? No one knows. Comes along Darrow and says, we're going to police this because we can figure out, especially in terms of like combing the dark web, when data is being stolen and when your rights are being violated. And what they do is they find these instances and then they go to plaintiffs firms and they say, hey, we'll sell you this case. We'll tell you about this case. You can litigate it. But you're going to have to pay our fee. And we're also going to take upside in the case. They have sold hundreds of these cases to like some of the most impressive plaintiff firms in the US. And what's crazy, I mean, I've spoken to lawyers who've taken these cases on, wow, and they say the same thing every time. They're like, the case is massive. We would not have found this in a million years. Now, why do I love this as an example of legal technology not sucking? First of all, you said before, like, you're a big believer in privacy. There's no one to police privacy, right? Wow. That's why all these companies have been using, biometric cameras when you walk into a store to like figure you out and steal your data and like, and they're not allowed to do that. These are security cameras. By the way, this is one of the cases that Darrow has been able to unearth, is where is people having their data taken from these biometric cameras. But there's many, many other instances. One of the ones that they've talked about publicly, I think, is there was a fertility app, and women were putting in really sensitive data into this fertility app that had promised, not to sell their data. But in fact, they were selling their data to the Chinese government. And Darrow found that case and brought it to a plaintiff's firm. So I love the message of this company. I love their mission, which
like
is
Robin Hoods of sorts.
Yeah, and yeah, like a Robin Hood, but like protecting you, right? Because no one else is willing to do it, because, as they say, companies aren't going to take compliance seriously unless someone stings them first. So the good of it, I know there are people who I've explained this company to that kind of roll their eyes. Oh, they're just making money from plaintiffs' firms. I'm like, listen, I'm not opposed to people making money, especially if they're ultimately like teaching companies to take privacy more seriously. I can't think of like a more important common good. The other reason I like this company is they're not trying to sell efficiency to lawyers. Like you said before, lawyers don't really care, and you can whine and cry about it all you want. Lawyers should, but they don't. But you know what lawyers do love? They love new business, especially new business that they never would have found, right? That they're willing to pay for. That's why Darrow is crushing it in a down economy, because no one is ever like upset about paying to take on huge new cases. So I think they're a super interesting company and another good example of legal technology not sucking.
Okay, so those were three great examples. And I think what's interesting about all three is that none of them, like you said, are selling to law firms. They've all kind of like circumvented what you'd see as the classic route for who the consumer is and how to sell a product, and they've found alternative ways of packaging and selling these products.
So let me give you one more, and three is the best, but let me give you one more that I think sort of hammers in a different point. It's a company I invested in called 10b5. 10b5 is basically an easier way to draft.
That sounds like a filing.
To draft disclosures, right? So like they have been used by many law firms, but here's why I invested with them, because they showed me one case study of theirs where a firm had bought the product for the following reason. They hired a new associate, capital markets. The associate said, hey, in my old firm, we used this other product. Are you really going to tell me I have to go back to doing this the old way? And the firm quickly bought the product. And what I loved about that is it's true that like lawyers don't care about efficiency, but you know what they do care about is like their associates not leaving. And if there are associates who prefer to work in a certain way, like the firms want to accommodate that. The firms don't want to buy technology that they think no one is going to use. It will sit on the shelf and be useless. but law firms do care quite a bit about keeping their talent and investing in their talent. For all the jokes that are made about, law firms treating their associates poorly, they don't actually want them to leave, right? So if there's like a better way to work where the KPI is not how many dollars you saved, but like, hey, do our attorneys like this, right? Like that's why like law firms in the past like bought expensive real estate and prime locations. It was not just to like sort of flex for their clients. It's also ultimately because they want, like, it was supposed to be like a sort of rich experience being in like a top office with a beautiful downtown view. Like that those things are important. So I think that technology, the more that we go remote, the more that like people are moving out of those buildings. I think technology is going to be like a very key part of like the user experience of a law firm. So like, I think there is a reason, but those are some examples.
Okay, so there might be a bit of overlap in your answer to my next question, but when we were trying to schedule this interview, we had to like cancel a few times, and on the second time I sent you another Calendly link, and you're like, "Oh no, I hate Calendly. Please don't let me use Calendly again to have to schedule with you." And like to me, Calendly is like one of the most efficient tools that I have. It's something that like I hated working in a big firm. Like every time I wanted to schedule something with another lawyer in the firm, like even the guy in the office next to me, he'd be like, "Oh, call my secretary and she'll find a time that's available for both of us." And then it'd be like 6 or 7 emails back and forth, like especially if there was more than one party involved, trying to figure out like a time that works for people. And Calendly just like makes that so much easier with everything. You don't have to like find the dial-in details and cut and paste it. It's just like amazing. So you hate Calendly. I would like to know why, and B, right, just give me some of like the main tech tools that you do envision as like being integral for law firms to incorporate into the day-to-day today, besides the ones that you already mentioned, and like if they differ based on like the size of the firm, then also like what you'd recommend for like big law firms. And
my answer is every single law firm right now should be finding an LLM partner, large language model, right? Whether that's Harvey AI, whether it's Case Text, there's going to be others out there. Every single firm right now needs to have some kind of LLM partner, and just using ChatGPT will help you somewhat, but it's not going to be the sort of fine-tuned tool that you're going to need. Every one of them must have this, but it's not 100% clear today, like which one is the best, right? Like that. This is very, very new. My assumption is that there will be many more released, and I think it's important to find one and to get moving on that now, because the amount of compute power is limited. So you literally could have a situation right now, if you're a law firm, where your competitor firms have a technology that allows them to move much faster that you just can't get access to. That's never really been the case, right? Like once one firm had the technology, another firm could get it, right? Except that like there's, as you've seen with ChatGPT, when there's high use, only certain people can get it. I was actually demoing one of these new products, and the company told me, "Hey, listen, we can give you like access, but you can only use it in the morning Israel
between 2:30 and 3.
Now, will this get solved over time? Yes, but not in the short term, and that matters also, right? You can't have a situation in the short term as a law firm where it's understood that companies who use you are going to have to pay much more and move much slower than your counterparts. That is a really bad look. So that's sort of my answer on the law firm side. Here's what I'll say about Calendly. I understand like how it could be more efficient. The thing that I can't stand is very often people like want to meet with me and then they say, "Here's my Calendly, find time." And like it sort of like strikes me as like, ugh, I've got to go like do a task now. And you'd say, "Okay, but it's so easy. Just click the link and like go to it," right? Except that like when I go to the link, I have many times accepted a Calendly invite only to realize afterwards, because it's not able to look at my calendar. I've like booked at a time that like I've double books and I have to cancel it and go back to the person. They have to reset. I consider it to not be like a great user experience. And my thing is like, I don't actually have so much difficult time scheduling. What I do is when I want to schedule something, I send someone an invite and I say, hey, I sent you an invite. Let me know if that time doesn't work, and we'll do the scheduling dance. At which point I will pick up the phone and call them and just on the phone figure out a time to make that happen. It takes like 30 seconds also, right? So it's like I'm not like Mr. Techie when it comes to like do I use a ton of different like tools? A lot of times I think like we've got like a pretty amazing technology already. And if you like have a slightly smarter process, like in my example, just like I've literally never had someone actually write back like, oh no, that time doesn't work for me. Usually if you ask though, people will look at their calendars like, well, I don't really want to do it then. And like there's like a whole like there's like weird like psychologies that go into that, as opposed to like if I just send them the time and I'm like, hey, this is 2 weeks in advance. What's the chance that they're blocked off during this like prime location, on the calendar? Let's just like it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They probably don't have a call 2 weeks from now. So let me just put that on their calendar and hope for the best. And again, I always say like if that doesn't work, we can schedule. But usually like that takes too much action on someone else's part to be like, oh no, this doesn't work, even though like it's at a spot where I've got nothing. So that's like a weird like Calendly quirk. I've been roasted on Twitter before for saying that I don't like Calendly.
Fair enough. Big fan of Calendly, but I totally agree with you on the etiquette. Like it's one of the things actually that like they sent the whole email. I really want to like perfect the use of the tool. So like I've changed my approach. Also, the first time a client sent me like, here's my Calendly, I was like, F you, like what I have to like go. But that was like my first double take. Now I feel like it's much more well received because so many people are using Calendly, and like they once sent an email out with like a little spiel that you could write, like please suggest times that are a few times that are available, or if more convenient for you, use my Calendly link. And then like generally I feel like that's people are more receptive.
I'm just like a little bit more assertive. Like instead of walking up to the person in the bar and saying, can I buy you a drink? Do you like, gin, this, or this? I'm just like, hey, I just sent a beer over. If they tell me they don't, they tell me they don't like beer.
I find it a little bit like invasive. It's like, what you're scheduling on my calendar? Like you don't know what I'm doing next week. Like
it's a bold move.
Yes. All right. And is reply all still a thing? Like I remember, I think Avi / Austin Feld introduced us. Like he was working with you a little bit on reply all at some point. Is that still
reply all? It's no longer a thing. We the company it was making money. It just wasn't making enough money to like make me very rich. And I thought there were more interesting things going on in Legaltech, and I was burnt out on the project. We were obviously onto something, and I say all the time that like entrepreneurs will often give you the following cliche that good ideas are a dime a dozen. Everything is all about the execution. That's ridiculous. Good ideas are not a dime a dozen. Since having the idea for Reply All, which I genuinely think is the best idea I've ever had for a kind of revolutionary company, I have not had an idea as good since. Now, ultimately, I wasn't able to build it into a billion-dollar behemoth that I thought it should be, and completely changed the way that we consumed and created conversations on the internet. That's true. But it was still a great idea, which is why Clubhouse later, more or less like went with the same exact product that we were building. And by the way, guys from Clubhouse, which I know it didn't ultimately succeed, but like it
succeeded for a while.
Yeah, but
before Twitter Spaces.
They were definitely onto something. And look, Twitter Spaces picked it up. And that's really the problem. The ultimate problem with this idea, with Reply All, again, because the difference between Reply All and every other social platform where you can find conversations is we said, hey, listen, conversations are literally only interesting when certain people can talk and everyone else is the audience. Once everyone is in the conversation, that's no longer a conversation. That's a conference. That's just a crowded conference floor. The idea here was to create a way to have clear delineations between participants and audience, and make it really, really easy for like super interesting people to have conversations with each other that could be visible by the public. And at the time, what we were pitching was essentially not Facebook or Twitter. So, hey, listen, conversation online is broken. And we would say this to VCs, and they would look at us like we were crazy. They're like, what do you mean Facebook and Twitter are broken? These are the two most successful companies of our time. They're already changing the way that conversation exists online. And anyway, even if you're right, they're just going to, replicate you eventually. So I think they were clearly not wrong on number one, right? Facebook and Twitter were not, I think have in many ways been very, very harmful from a societal perspective in terms of the types of conversations they cultivated. And there should have been something better. Where they were probably right, however, is the minute you make something that's popular, Facebook and Twitter will just replicate it unless it's able to generate its own audience like a Reddit, right? That's sort of a good example where you do have alternative formats for conversation, and the conversations on Reddit are not exactly like they are on Twitter and Facebook, but Reddit was able to create its own audience. Once you're dependent on Facebook and Twitter for your audience, and you are an alternative to Facebook and Twitter, you're already dead. Because the minute that you get any kind of popular, they will replicate it, and like in the case of Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse, they do have the position to put you out of business. So I think ultimately, even though it was a great idea, by the time we were in it, Facebook and Twitter were already too established and cemented as the winners in the space for anyone to really compete with them.
Right. I think like one of the key instructions that people give, and we're going to finish one second. One of the key instructions that people give entrepreneurs when they're starting a company is, I'm not really sure how to say this in English, but you don't want to educate a market. It doesn't work really in English, but like you don't want to, if you have to teach people how to live and act differently, then it's going to be a really hard sell. So finding ways to
you have
integrate.
to be Steve Jobs in order to pull that off. That's the answer. Meaning Steve Jobs did essentially feed the market something they didn't necessarily think they needed. No one thought they needed a computer at home.
Right. I remember
he was teaching you
reading
about
his
why that should be the case.
His biography. He's like he did away with what do they call it, like working groups. Like they had like they used to have in Apple these like working groups. They'd bring people in and they would ask them like what they like. He's like, no. That's not how we do it here. Like we will tell people what they like. We don't need them to tell us what they want. So yeah, but he's the outlier. Like nobody else is Steve Jobs or ever will be. Thank you so much,
Satoshi. I would say Satoshi is the other one.
Satoshi.
La 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 la
la la la la la la la la la la la la. I love it. Brilliant, super creative, entertaining, and I wish you many more views.
Thanks, Yitzi.
For more Legaltech Alpha, make sure to follow Zach on Twitter. His handle is Zach Abramowitz, ZachAbramowitz, and make sure to check out killerwhalestrategies.com. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.